So hi, everybody. I am Miranda Hess from Lehigh County, and I'm here with Lehigh Valley Supporting Families Collaborative with my co-lead. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Gonzalez Brown, co-lead for Northampton County and the collab. So, hi. And we'll have our guests, our presenters introduce themselves. So the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Steph McDonald. I am a remote support specialist through Safe and Home. If you aren't familiar with me, I've been in the field for several decades. I've been with Safe Home for 4 years. I always say working with individuals with IDA is something that is incredibly near and dear to my heart and something I'm very passionate about. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I will allow my very talented coworker here to also introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Jo Ellen Bloom. I'm a remote supports consultant for Safe and Home. However, I am new to Safe and Home, but I'm not new to working with consumers. I've probably been working with individuals for the last 10 years. My most recent role was a supports coordinator. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see this. Can everyone see?
Yep, you're good.
All right, let me just make sure. Okay. So like we said, we're from Safe and Home. So we are a Pennsylvania ODP approved provider. We're going to go through the slideshow. I like to give a little a little housekeeping. I tend to talk a little fast. I can't get that New Yorker out of me. So if we're going too quick, let us know. Feel free to interrupt at any time with any questions you may have. And now, Joella, we're going to kind of go back and forth and present some topics here. So we do have this slideshow prepared to kind of guide the conversation. But again, please feel free to ask any questions along the way.
I'll do the first slide.
Perfect. There you go. Take it away.
Okay, so when I talk to individuals about remote supports, I like to explain it as thinking of remote supports as a virtual on-demand direct support professional with technological assistance to provide consumers support. So what this may look like is we might give someone what we have as a tablet or a geocom, so remote supports can connect to them and talk to them either at scheduled times or on demand. In addition to different technologies such as sensors, I'm blanking, Stephanie. Sorry. So typically we use a lot of sensors. We also have. Can you fill me in because I can't?
Sure.
I'm blanking on the technology.
So we use a variety of different technologies to be that connection and that conduit to that staff. So, whether that be sensors that detect motion or lack thereof, face-to-face tablets, we have geocoms, but that's kind of how we connect to our remote support staffs for those individuals.
Right. So we have three different kinds of support. The first is active monitoring. So think of this as shift coverage. So typically, working with consumers, I know a lot of the times overnight coverage is really challenging to find. So what Safe and Home will do with active monitoring is we'll put sensors in the home that just detect motion. And if there's something that alerts remote supports, because they'll watch the sensors for that shift. So let's say it's like 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Safe and Home will reach out to the consumer and possibly their call tree. Scheduled check-ins. This is typically where we are able, like this is where we really shine in remote supports. So this is to help fill in the gaps when there's not staffing or family in the home. So what this does is we do schedule check-ins for medication reminders, sometimes just for socialization, for health and wellness, just an overall, just like a hey, how are you kind of thing. Support on demand is used when consumers need it. So that's 24/7, any time of day. It's typically used for a lot of people who will frequently call their family members or who will call emergency services. That's usually when support on demand works best. A lot of the times it is paired with the scheduled check-ins.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So with all three different, the other two levels, you can always have support on demand. And what's unique about that is you can call or text. We have a dedicated text line as well. Right. Moving forward. Do you want me to take this one?
Sure.
Okay, so what we have here is the 5 elements of support. As with any service provided, our services center around the person we support, our individual consumer. So let's call him Dave. So Dave comes to us, and oftentimes when families might ask, or providers, they'll say, what is this remote supports? And I always say it can be difficult to do that, to describe it, because what might work for Dave will be very different works for me or Joellen. We want to ask what their needs are, what they're looking to accomplish, short-term, long-term goals. How will we keep you safe? Does that occur in the home? Who's a part of your family and support system? If you don't have any natural supports, do we have paid supports? Are you just looking to be safe out in the community? So everything that we do to support a particular individual might not match, the other person. With that person supported, remote supports then shifts over to the top left-hand corner of our remote support staff. So our remote support staff are based out of, at this time, California and Arizona in a HIPAA compliant center. We frequently get the question, do I always get the same staff person? And the answer to that is no, but you generally get the same group of people. And our individuals really do develop that rapport in working with these individuals. When a person calls into remote support staff, their picture will come up on their screen. They'll have a data report of what they're currently focusing on, any pertinent information for that particular moment. Let's say it's Dave's birthday, it'll pop up. Oftentimes, Dave gets to really know individuals on certain shifts. So he might call in and I answer, and they'll say, oh no, I wanted to talk to Joellen, and hang up. And we'll say, all right, Joellen, let's call back, So it's very person-centered as their needs may vary. Perhaps we're working on a hygiene goal with Dave, and he has a really hard time. We're providing reminders for him to shower. Maybe on this particular week, the word shower is kind of a trigger, and he's not going to respond well to that. They'll note that so that it pops up, and we'll say, hey, please utilize, let's go do our hygiene instead. And we work in conjunction with all of Dave's support teams. So remote support staffs will attend every ISP meeting. If there is a critical meeting that needs to attend, any other part of that, they'll work with that individual. If the behavior specialist is involved, part of their behavior support plan will be reviewed with the staff and incorporated within their support plan. So when I tell Dave, remote support staff, think of that as someone that if you have a staff person, if there is a caregiver involved in your life, they're just like that, but they assist you virtually through our assistive technology. The way we do that is through examples of some of the technology located on your lower right-hand side. So real quick, the first and foremost piece of technology utilized most often, as Joellen had pointed out, wow, that was a flashback, Mirabelle. As Joellen had pointed out, is our tablet, our two-way tablet. What's nice about our technology is it comes in either Wi-Fi or cellularly based for most of our significant technologies that are utilized. That's really good for individuals that might not have Wi-Fi, might not be able to pay the bill all the time. Maybe they're going between, a residential setting and they visit with family on the weekends, what have you. So the tablet's really nice because it's that two-way connection. We can see Dave, Dave can see us. So perhaps one of our goals are working on hygiene or getting ready before we go out for the day. And, we have individuals that we might do a morning wellness check-in call and say, hey, Dave, did you brush your teeth? You look like you didn't quite wash your face. Can we kind of comb your hair? And I think perhaps we were wearing the same shirt yesterday. Let's go ahead and change. Or perhaps we're working on a goal of cleaning up the house and we call Dave maybe every Tuesday night because Wednesday's garbage day. So we'll ask Dave to come show us the inside of your fridge. Can we see if we threw anything out? Do we need to keep any leftovers that may be outdated? Or let's go check that litter box. Did we change that? It's nice just to have that visual cue on Dave. And some of our individuals work better with communications via seeing someone speak to them directly. So we have the ability to do that through the tablet. Other devices I would like to note is our GeoComm is that little red kind of beeper-like button with the red push, and there's also a smartwatch there. Those are cellular devices that also have geolocation tracking abilities. So if Dave wants to take his device out and about within the community, we can pinpoint his exact location. This might be important in that Dave might be learning how to travel train. We support individuals in every county in Pennsylvania, but particularly those that might be learning how to navigate community, maybe they're taking transportation, they have a bus pass or something and they get lost, we can notify, he can call in and say, hey, I'm kind of lost, where do I turn? Or perhaps individuals that might have a risk of elopement, we can kind of monitor where they're going if they're willing to wear those devices. What's nice about the GeoComm and all the technology that we provide is it only connects to Safe and Home staff, our remote support staff. So we have to be able to connect directly with them. And then any individuals that want to also contact Dave would have to be programmed into it. If it's another family member or an on-call provider, that's 24/7. The GeoComm is particularly nice because when you call the GeoComm, you don't need to press any buttons to answer it. It automatically comes up like a speakerphone. So that's really nice for some of our individuals if we're checking on them and they struggle to do that. The other thing I would like to point out in terms of our technology is we have a beautiful field services department that's really compassionate, caring towards our individuals. They will go out and install all the equipment, train whoever needs to be trained on it, and maintain that equipment. So any devices that have software data, if it ever becomes lost, broken, or damaged, we will go out and do that. What's nice too is, we have individuals that might live at home with family, but maybe they're working also at a day program that's helping them learn their technology. I've had field services also go out to day programs to be like, hey, Dave's working with this, or let's make sure that we know how to keep a charger there so this GeoComm is always charged. Another device we have up there on the top is the medication pill dispenser. That's been particularly popular recently for whatever reason. People have been reaching out for medication administration assistance. And the smart pill dispenser is really nice in that it also connects to remote support staff. So the way that works is you would load your medications, it would send out an alert for you up for an hour. The smart pill dispenser can also send a text alert to a personal cell phone if they have that, if individuals are capable of having their own cell phone, or Safe Home could provide one. And then if individual does not take their meds within an hour, it notifies remote support staff. So then we can follow along and notify any person that might be as outlined in their care plan. Joellen said, we have almost 90 pieces of tech. All of our tech that we can use for individuals in Pennsylvania must connect it to remote support staff. So just keep that in mind. Most significantly is our sensor technology. So that's that little golf ball down there. And that functions to detect motion or lack thereof. So let's say, like Joellen mentioned, the first one, we're doing active monitoring. So we're now going to monitor Dave on the overnights in lieu of in-person supports, whether that be family or provider. We can put sensor technology in his bedroom, in the hallways, in the bathroom, and that just sees if he got up and moved or not, but we cannot see him. It's not a camera. We do have cameras. We never, ever put cameras in personal settings such as bedrooms or bathrooms. They're not very frequently utilized. In addition to sensor technologies for motion, we also have open, close, shut, so we can see Dave opens and closes any doors, windows, and even the refrigerator. All of our interactions with remote supports, whether it be sensor technology that's alerted, a conversation with remote supports, is compiled into weekly data reports. This is extraordinarily nice because in this field, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. And it's nice wherein perhaps you might need additional information for perhaps a medical concern. Perhaps Dave is trying to learn how to track his insulin levels every time he takes his meds. He could take that insulin level, report it to remote support staff, and we'd write it down. We also have seizure technology that detects seizures with tonic-clonic movement. So that a seizure wristband would note the duration of the seizure, the heart rate, frequency. That all also gets categorized on those weekly data reports, which can then be taken to either a neurologist, a primary care physician. Oftentimes behavior specialists will request this information because perhaps we don't know what's going on with an individual, and now we see all of a sudden they're up every night at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's not something we might have noted otherwise. That's a real quick overview. Any questions with that before moving on? All right. Let me do this one, Joel, and you got it. Which one?
I definitely can do it. If you don't mind just stepping in,
Yeah,
if I need a little bit of help. So, like Steph had said earlier, we really like to speak with the consumer and their support team to figure out what their needs are. We're not just going to come in and just, show you our plethora of technology. We really want to get to know the consumer and how we can best help them. So, what this might look like for an individual, more recently, I'm just going to use a personal, not a more personal example from just working in the field recently. So, I had someone who lives on their own in an apartment, and I went in, did a consultation, and spoke with them about some of their needs. And what came out of it is that we were going to do a tablet so that they could reach out to us and we could see them, to do check ins twice a day for medication observation. They were given a smart pill dispenser to ensure that they were taking their medications so that it would alert them at the proper time. And they were also given a geocom for falls. So when we are talking to individuals, these are the things we're thinking about. How can we best support them at night? Where are they? Oh,
Oops, sorry.
was that you? That's okay.
Sorry.
Where are they in their life? Do they have a medication need? Do they need seizure management? Are they an elopement risk? Do they tend to wander when they're out alone in the community? One thing we always like to ask is how individuals are sleeping, because that also can give us kind of a key to, if they're feeling safe in their home. And, if they're not feeling safe, would putting a doorbell in that connects to remote supports be helpful? We also look at emotional wellness, because something, I think across the board with consumers is feeling lonely. And using remote supports is a really great way to help consumers feel less lonely.
Mhm.
One of the things that when I used remote supports for my consumers that I really liked was that it gave our individuals just more autonomy and independence and confidence. Steph, do you want to add in anything?
Sure. I think we have so many good examples of how this fits in different categories. One good example of emotional wellness is most frequently a lot of our individuals, especially after COVID, we had people that necessarily day programs were cut down. There was more increased staffing shortages. We had people that were frequently reaching out to 911 or family members. These individuals aren't the best at maintaining friendships. We don't want to make sure that they're victimized and doing the wrong things. So we had several individuals that were charged with misuse of 911 funds for calling 911 all the time. We like to go ahead and replace that. Call us instead for any reason. And we want to make sure that we're providing these supports in very concrete, realistic, and easy to use ways. So we like to tell people if there's anything that you're working on or concerned about, just have that conversation and we can talk through that. All right. Next slide here. So here we have the benefits of remote support. So first and foremost, like we talked about, we're going to talk about the individual, how it's very person-centered. What is it that they need? Oftentimes, if there's a hesitation with an individual to utilize certain services, we start out with a conversation, what's important to you? What do you want to work best? Some of the individuals we support are very excited to start services. Other individuals might be a little bit more resistant. So we have that very real conversation. Our service is only good as you make it. If you're not going to pick up the phone when we call for a med reminder, then, how is this going to benefit you? How are your goals going to work? I also want to point out, we recognize there's also some fear oftentimes of whether or not we would ever replace any supports. We've never done that. We've never displaced a DSP, but it's, kind of think of that wraparound. We're bridging where we need to be, those gaps. We're the least restrictive service. So oftentimes, if a person has, you don't need someone sitting next to you on the couch at, from 4 o'clock on because you need meds at 8 o'clock, perhaps we can help out with you. We're the least restrictive and very flexible. We always have that 24/7. Whenever you need us, we're there. And we want to make sure we balance your health and dignity, health and safety with that dignity of risk. And what that means is allowing people to, as safely as possible, try to enhance their independence, learn new skill sets with knowing that you might make a mistake. Season, who some of you may be familiar with, always loves to give the example that when you first start driving, you're going to make a mistake. We used to print out MapQuest. If we were never able to make a mistake when driving and never allowed to get their licenses, I highly doubt any of us would ever have our licenses. We have to make sure we have the ability to have that dignity of risk and able to make those mistakes safely and supported. Remote supports also benefits our supports coordinators. I'm sorry, I'm cut off a little bit here. I was going to move for our natural supports because it helps provide relief for our caregiver burnout. So one example I have of probably the most intense case of caregiver burnout when we came in about 2-3 years ago. I met with a grandmother who was living at her front door on the overnights. Her grandson, with whom she cared for, was a very large individual with autism, nonverbal, who would like to elope during the night and break into the neighbors' houses in a very urban setting. And it was extremely nerve-wracking. It was very important to that grandmother that he continued to live there, but we were very nervous about what could happen in the middle of the night in such a neighborhood. So this poor woman was sleeping on the floor right by the front door. She was just a walking zombie at all times. I recognize this as an extreme example of that, but we had come in. What we had done for this particular individual is we did that overnight monitoring, from 11 to 7. We put sensors, in his room. We could tell when he was coming out. We came up with a whole plan that absolutely was able to guarantee his safety. We were able to wake up grandma the second he woke up in the middle of the night. She would run over, provide care. In the event that, because there's 2 stories, in the event that individual made it to the top tier of the stores, we were calling the police immediately to be there. So this grandmother was so very thankful as we could work together as a team to put services in place for this particular individual. She was able to sleep in her bed. She talked about how she came back to life. Think about all the times you have a bad night's sleep. And if you're providing care within this setting, how much that weighs on an individual and how much that takes a mental and physical and financial toll on caregivers of individuals. So part of our role is, although we're providing care and supports to the individual we support, it's also their team, their families, the natural caregivers, the providers. We want to make sure that we're kind of providing relief so that they feel, good about that. And the way we're doing that is through providing some extra peace of mind, knowing that someone is fully supported. Oftentimes, Joellen and I and our team will meet with parents that are just too, this will never work out. I don't think it's going to happen. And it's been a really beautiful experience that after working with families after a couple of years, they do come back and say, hey, this is great. It really works so nicely. And allowing us, we take on the role a little bit of the bad guy and improve some relationships there. So perhaps we're calling Dave to constantly remind him, hey, Dave, clean up your room, or hey, Dave, let's take our meds. I personally, in my children, I remember kind of similar on the same token, I tried very hard about a decade ago to try to teach my daughter to learn to write her name. I wanted her to be prepared when she went to kindergarten. I was so frustrated because she wasn't doing it, and I know she could. But once she got to school, I was working with the teachers. It was beautiful. She could do it. So kind of sometimes individuals will respond better to other people outside of their natural supports. And allowing to plan for the future. There's that transition that it's a scary thought for a lot of these parents, and we always empathize and we say we recognize that, no one can do it better than you. And it's a very scary thought to say, well, have you thought about perhaps maybe when you're not around? What are some plans that you want to do? Or being able to know that there's some steps in place to, further that skill set. For providers, this has been very beneficial, especially recently with the preferred provider contracting. We guarantee coverage with the ability to kind of allow staff to be where they need to go. We are much lower cost, so we reduce the provider cost, and it reduces that demand on supervisors. So we're in there filling the role of perhaps, a staff that called off, they can go back to focus on work for them. And support coordinators, I'm sure Joellen can speak to that if she'd like to as a former support coordinator. Just you want to touch base on that real quickly, Joellen?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I'm a supports coordinator. I was a supports coordinator from Berks. And we did have some areas where we did have very limited availability for services. And this really did come in really well for that. There definitely is not a wait list. When I had my consumers with Safe and Home, it was like almost immediate. Like it was the fastest onboard I think I've ever had for services. It definitely does provide relief from the frequent callers. I had many of those, although I enjoyed the conversations with my frequent callers, but it definitely does provide relief for those individuals. And that was, as a supports coordinator, that was one of the bigger appeals for it, to help mitigate some of that.
Very nice. And like I said before, it's a lower cost service. So oftentimes we'll have people come to us with, PFDF budgets, limited budgets, and we're able to kind of provide a little bit more care and, kind of stretch out other services larger so that we can wiggle on in there. All right, so what we like to recommend to families and providers and other individuals are some tips and strategies for successful transitions. So, like I said earlier, this works best if the whole team approaches it with a positive attitude. We're working on it together. The whole team comes together like any other service. Think about any other type of transition in your life because change we recognize can be very scary for everyone involved. So, some things that we like to recommend is developing that comprehensive transition plan. We want to look at the individual's needs and goals. Oftentimes, we will meet with parents and we kind of encourage them to kind of start that process sooner rather than later, especially if you're going to like look for waivers or what will their future look like? Will they be living at home? Is there a plan for them to eventually live out on their own? And how can we help that? What I often recommend, and I've seen the greatest success in a lot of individuals, especially from Lehigh and Northampton County, is we have some individuals that are really wanting to move out and branch out into their own apartments if they can, starting services at home. Come familiar with it. If that is remote supports and you're calling in, you set up familiarity with our services, our staff, how it works, and then transition out into whether you're moving into an apartment with staff and then already having that support with Safe and Home and that technology, we can expand upon it and add more things. We've had several families within your area that have done that, and they have done so very successfully with those individuals. I'm very, very proud of those individuals that have done that. We've had, as they are too as well. Family involvement is, family/caregiver involvement, whoever is vital to that person, whether it be, mom, dad, sister, brother, aunts, the mailman. We've seen a lot of interesting people at meetings, but that doesn't matter. Whoever is a positive role model and will help that person be successful in any of those transitions. And obviously professional supports, our professionals out, therapists, educators, case managers, they can really just think of it just like your ISP. Who do you want there? Who would you also want involved in your initial planning and stages of this? So is there any particular individual you want to cover?
Yeah, can I actually talk about the two consumers I had?
Sure.
Sure. So when I was in SC, I had two individuals that lived together. They were siblings. Their situation was a little unique in the fact that a Berks County in-home and community supports provider kind of did like a supported living situation with them. However, they did not have staff on the evenings and weekends, and these individuals were aging and they had very limited family support. So Safe and Home came in. We had several different technologies. In this instance, we did need to utilize cameras because one of my individuals was a fall risk, and if she fell, we needed to know where she was in the home. But the thing about Safe and Home is not only were they able to stay in their home longer, but it actually ended up saving the brother's life. Long story short, we had a massive ice storm. The technology had gone out, so there was no electricity, no internet. So Safe and Home, basically the technology alerted the remote supports to reach out to what we call the call tree, which are the emergency contacts. Someone went out to check on these two individuals and they found out that the brother needed to go to the hospital for an emergency. So not only did Safe and Home save his life, but it also allowed them to remain in their home for a lot longer. And this was done through several different technologies, but the main one being check-ins, as well as using a geocom.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. Yeah, we've had a lot of nice there, and I'll get into this example in a minute, but we heard on a call recently that someone was just doing an actual check-in call and they started choking. And it wasn't that they were choking risk ever, and they immediately called 911 and reported to the home. So that was another in that moment life-saving scenario. So that was beautiful. This is Nate for our first example. So these are individuals that we truly support. We changed their names and pictures, obviously, but we just like to provide some examples because it's sometimes easiest to see how it's used for those individuals rather than just talking about it. So Nate, this happens very frequently. Nate lived at home with his parents. He was diagnosed with mild ID, blood pressure, migraines, and epilepsy. Nate had a very, very significant epilepsy, and that he also had Todd's paralysis. Excuse me. So Todd's paralysis with epilepsy is very rare, but what happens is when you start seizing, your whole body goes rigid and freezes, and it would happen anywhere from 1 to 3 days. He often needed to be admitted to the hospital if it would keep going on, and he didn't take his rescue meds right away. So this often happened when he was very sensitive to heat. In the hot times, he had to really hydrate. It would happen on the overnights because he would, be a hot box when he was sleeping and just heat up. So it would particularly happen during the evening hours. He was a little bit more fine during the awake hours, thankfully. So Nate needed a lot of reminders initially to take his medications on time and to hydrate and make sure he was taking those proper precautions during the heat. His parents, particularly mom, was very, very nervous. She really had a hard time letting him out of his sight for anything. And he wanted to be much more independent. He had a girlfriend. They wanted to spend time alone. It was really creating kind of tension within their relationship. So SC kind of reached out to me, was like, well, what are we going to do here with Nate? So Nate was advocating to increase his independent time at home and in the community. His biggest thing was he wanted to go to the movies with his girlfriend without his mother there. She'd be right there, and he wanted to go without her. So we compromised, we built upon the fact that we are worried about your health and safety. So first and foremost, we did the seizure wristband, and that worked for Nate because his seizures had movement. It would detect if they happened. For Nate's particular support plan, the second anything was noted, it would notify if he was out and about in the community, if they could see where he was, they would notify 911 right away and mom right after that. This worked out beautifully. It kind of decreased mom's nervousness with that. The other deal we made with Nate was like, okay, we're going to call you at medication times, on this 2-way tablet, and we will take our medications and make sure that we're hydrating. And I had that conversation, Nate, if this is important to you, have to meet us halfway. This is part of becoming an adult and accepting some of these responsibilities. We also put smart buttons around Nate's bedroom in the middle of the night so that if he felt like something was coming on, he could hit it and notify everyone if they needed to come out and administer any of that emergency medication, and motion detectors because mom was very nervous. Now Nate is a beautiful success story in that he started out living at home and he eventually was able to move out into his own apartment, which mom stated that she never thought that would happen, both of them. And their relationship has really improved very thankfully due to this remote support services. It was really something that we were able to see him happily accomplish some of his goals, and mom felt a little bit better too. So that's nice. We want to make sure that we're ensuring that peace of mind for our caregivers and our everyone involved. This is Brandon. Some examples of supporting mental health. I believe he's an example of one of our coworkers across the other side of the state, but Brandon is, kind of similar in that, if you're working within this field long enough, you could see people very similar. This is very nice because it shows supports within multiple locations. So Brandon was 20 years old and lived at home with his mother during the week, but he stayed with his sister on the weekends. So he had some severe mental health concerns. He was diagnosed with mild IDD, anxiety, and unspecified psychosis, and was prescribed medication 3 times a day. Brandon really struggled to take his medications consistently in between settings. So it was something that was important to him to continue going and visiting multiple locations. But due to his mental health, it really was important that he continued to take that consistently. He was another one in working with him that once he felt better, he would stop taking it, which, as we all know, it's important not, to continue to take it to maintain proper mental health. So medication reminders and prompts from the family frequently resulted in fighting, a lot of verbal aggression and property destruction. There was talk of him not being able to stay in these locations, which is obviously devastating for Brandon and his whole family. So the team oftentimes will find that, we reach out as like the last Hail Mary ditch resort. What can we do? So Safe and Home came in and we had conversations with him. We need to, again, set up a cellular tablet. And the reason we did cellular and not the Wi-Fi is because he's going between locations. He can bring his tablet wherever he wants. We will call, talk to him, make sure he's taking his medications, as well as a smart pill dispenser. So he knew that he had up to an hour to take it. And if he didn't take his medications, remote support staff would be made aware and be able to relay that to his mother and sister. So that was kind of really motivating for him to make sure that he was taking his medications on time. With these supports, he was incredibly consistent with his medications. And unfortunately, it was something that he was continued to live and go in between settings. His independence improved, his relationships with his family members improved. Brandon also would reach out to us on a social aspect. It wasn't just for that medication. If he started becoming upset and wanted to yell at his family, he would call us instead. So that was really nice. It was something that we could focus on. Do you want me to do this one too, Joel? Yeah, okay. So this is June Woo. I have 2 to 3 examples of individuals similar to this. So we support several people that might have language concerns or barriers. So for this particular example, for this woman, she lived at home with her mother and both women only spoke Korean. So that was, you know, it can be a concern if you need supports. Now, up until prior to coming to their home, I believe June's sister was living with her, but had to move out. Now, her mother was older. She made it extraordinarily clear she wasn't going anywhere and she wanted her daughter to stay with her. But at one point, mom kind of had a medical emergency, fell down, wasn't super responsive. It was extraordinarily concerning because June was not able to reach out and contact anyone. She did not understand how to call 911, and even if she did, she wouldn't be able to speak in English. So the family reached out again saying, what can we do? Supports coordinator they want to stay in this location. How can we support them? What can we do to ensure that she has reliable, easy way to communicate in the event of emergency? So this is one of those creative things where I went out to the home and I kind of thought about it. And what we did was we put a Geocom Ultra in place. The other thing, when I went out to the home, there was no carbon monoxides either. There's no smoke detectors. I'm like, okay, let's start off with that first. We put carbon monoxide smoke detectors in the home that remote supports can connect to. In the event that there was a fire, they would immediately call 911. They would let everyone know that. We put in Geocom Ultra, the device where you just push the button. We worked with June and her family worked with her that if ever there was an emergency, she would push that button. We also put smart buttons by the door and another one in the kitchen. If there was an emergency, you hit this button. What we did then was we had a whole call tree of June's family members that if remote supports got an alert from any of these devices, they would then call June's family members until they got a hold. There was like 10 people on this. They would call to connect with her. They would either call the smart button, they would connect to make sure they're okay. One lived very close by, they would rush over. If in the event they did not get anyone within, 5-10 minutes, then they were calling 911 to do a wellness check. So this worked out really beautifully. And the family, again, was surprised that June was able to go ahead and understand how to do this and utilize this. We also put in later on a tablet because then she knew to like answer it and could wave or not and bring it around. So this started off with very little incremental use of technology adding on. And what's nice about this, and at Safe at Home with Everyone, you can change any devices in any setting. Nothing is ever set in stone. You can add check-in calls. They don't necessarily have to, you could just start with support on demand. Maybe you only want to check and call once a week. Maybe you want to add it at certain times. Perhaps, let's say you're getting a job and you need to be woken up for that job and mom's at work and she can't leave work to make sure that Johnny's out of bed. We can add check-in calls 2 hours before he's supposed to be out and about and ready for someone to pick him up. So that's what's really nice too, is it's very customizable and nothing's ever set in stone. Some of our budgetary. Oh, okay, go ahead. Yep.
I was gonna say I can take this slide. So some of the things that we consider when implementing remote supports is the type of waiver that an individual may have. So what this may look like is an individual may have one of 3 waivers, the PFDS, the person family driven support waiver, a consolidated waiver, or a community living waiver. We also accept base funds, which is funds that come directly from the county, private pay, as well as ABLE funds. The one thing I do want to really highlight is the cost comparison. Typically for in-home and community supports, it's about $44 an hour, whereas remote supports is $9 an hour. So that is a significant savings for waivers since most of them have limited funds available to the consumer. In addition, the companion's about $33 an hour compared to remote supports, which is $9 an hour.
Mm-hmm. And that's the only caveat we have here is for individuals living in provider settings with the daily rate is in place. If anyone has a question about that, we can answer that. But for very quickly, we then contract with those providers and billing is done a little bit differently. Okay. Oh, here we are. I jumped the gun. This was just an example of how we enter our supports and services in HCSIS for anyone that might needed that as a reference point. Right. So these are some steps to getting started. So for anyone that has any questions, if they want to start, thinking about this, you could contact us directly. You could also reach out to the county. They know how to get a hold of us, but I would reach out to us and your support coordinator. We would go and, like Joellen said, have that pre-consult, talk about what you're thinking about. We want to make sure that it will work for you, the individual, everyone involved. Oftentimes someone might come up with a request that might not fall in line, that might not necessarily work. And we'll say that, I'm never going to say, well, I don't know about that. Let's, we've had parents contact us wanting to put cameras in every room and we're saying, absolutely not, we can't do that, versus what can we do to help support you in a safe and friendly environment. We'd schedule that consultation. So we'd come out to the home. We can also do it virtually if need be, if that's what you prefer. It is that I think it's always best to come out in person to have that conversation, meet the family, show the technology, how it's utilized, see how the individual can work with it. After that, we would put together a proposal for services. And what that means is we jot down what outcomes you're working on, what devices you're going to use, and how that'll connect to our remote support services, and that cost for them. That gets submitted to your support coordinator, who forwards it on to the county for approval. If and when that's approved, we would then schedule an installation of your technology by that field services department. It's very important that they come out. They show you how the technology is utilized. They train anyone else that's involved. And then we have an onboarding support plan meeting where we review how we're going to utilize the technology, what the support staff needs to know. We try to make sure we build a really comfortable, nice support plan that's outlined for every case scenario. So for instance, Dave has an allergy to latex. We want to make sure that that's noted in the plan. Perhaps if he calls saying, on certain things might necessitate a call to 911, that when it's not a cold call then to the emergency EMS services, we can say, hi, we're calling on behalf of Dave. Please note he has an intellectual disability. He has an allergy to, latex. We're going to stay with you on the line. Please be very mindful of that when you go to the house. Or, Dave has a diagnosis of autism. Please make sure that we're understanding of such before we report to the home. This can provide a lot of peace of mind for individuals knowing, that they're fully supported even before EMS gets there. After we have that support plan meeting, your individual's onboarded and we continue to support you from here on out. We want to make sure that if anything changes, if you, just like any other supports and services, that we hold a quick meeting to adjust our plans to your current needs for all yourself and your families. All right. So this is our contact information. Joellen here is over at Lehigh. I'm over at Northampton. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. I realize we're done a little bit earlier than normal, but we really thank you so much for coming today and attending our session. We also have, I think, a family town hall coming up next month too, if you'd like to attend again. But again, thank you so much for attending today and letting us talk your ear off. Do you have any questions, anyone out there? We have the chat. I didn't see the chat.
Oh, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And that way, if anybody has any specific questions, they can go ahead and ask them.
Sure.